Do. What's up, everyone? That's my new uh Joe, since I don't have any intro music yet. I made that joke earlier today. I'm making it again. This is Fuego Steve bringing you another edition of the NFL podcast, the Fuego Pit, featuring Dr. Roto. What's up, Doc? How you doing tonight?
What's up, Fuego? Excited about this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. We got a good juicy slate. Last week we had a special guest in Patio Joe, our little cash game expert. Today we got another special guest. If you listen to the NBA pods, you know him. He's JaguarLou. He came in sixth in the DraftKings live finals for NFL last year, taking home $100,000. So he's not just an NBA expert.
Just to be accurate, I took six for MLB, not NFL.
No, Lou, are you JaguarLou because you drive a Jaguar?
No, you know what's funny? So I got back from the first final, and I had a couple of VIP, reps from DraftKings and FanDuel, and I was talking to them there, and they said, we don't love branding, but if you send us over a username, we'll change it for you. And I was drinking a little bit, and I thought back to college when I told this girl that my friends call me the Jaguar, and my friends came up behind me and said, "We don't freaking call him anything. No one calls him that." So I thought back to that, and I immediately did it. The Jaguar was born, and it really has nothing to do with anything other than that.
That's good, because DraftKings and FanDuel, they don't like to change people's usernames. So I remember when you changed it, you got in there because it was like your name, your first and last name, and you got them to change it for you. So you must be big time for them to do that. But I'm happy to have Lou on today. He's a big GPP player for NFL, and he's going to join Doc and I to give you our best takes. Before we get to the main slate, I just want to ask you guys any takes, hot takes, or any players you're going to play or fade in the two Saturday games. Doc, in the KC Charger game or Detroit-Chicago, anybody in those games you like?
Yeah, in the Detroit-Chicago game, there are three guys I really like. I really like Jordan Howard because the Lions' run defense has been abysmal for the last 6 weeks. So, I can't see how he doesn't go 90 yards and a touchdown. I like Marvin Jones because Chicago doesn't play well against the wide receiver too. And then Adam Shaheen is practically free. This guy is $1,000 less than most other plays this week. And Trubisky loves throwing to the tight end, and Detroit's terrible against the tight end. So I think all three of those guys are actually gifts this week.
All right. Lou, anybody on Saturday that you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, both of those plays, all four of those plays are great. I was just going to mention the Stafford play. If you're on a two-game slate, or even if you're not, Stafford is a viable play, and pairing him with Howard isn't that bad either. Howard is the kind of guy that he can see the passes out of the backfield for DraftKings if that's what the game flow points to. Or he could be a back that runs 25 times and, gets 100+ yards with 2 TDs. So I love Howard as well, despite them being the underdogs. But, yeah, pairing Stafford and Howard, normally you would never want to pair a running back from a team from in one game and then the opposing quarterback. But in this scenario, I have no problem playing Stafford and Howard together.
The one guy I wanted to mention was Keenan Allen. He's just been on fire of late. So I think if you can get Keenan Allen in your lineups going against banged up KC secondary, to do that. Over to the main slate, quarterback. Lou, let me ask you about Nick Foles. Lou, you're East Coast guy near Philly. What do you think of Nick Foles at the price of only $6,000, more expensive of $55 on DK?
Yeah, so Nick Foles is in a weird spot because most of my big dollar lineups will definitely be starting with Tom Brady and stacking that 4:30 game between Pittsburgh and New England. I think that's a very important game. It has playoff implications on the line, and you just need to have players from that game. And with that said, the Eagles come in on a nice spot. I actually wrote up the Eagles game. I was talking to my friend, and I wrote up a couple notes. I love Ajayi and Ertz together. And so this is all pointing to me saying most of my lineups started with Tom Brady in terms of construction, but I found myself going down to Foles and then throwing in Ajayi and Ertz, assuming the Eagles still kill it. I mean, yes, Wentz is gone, but we got to remember Foles was on the team before. He has played with Ertz before, and that was like at the height of his play. So Ertz and Foles have played before, and then you have Ajayi, Miami running back that really ran stuff over there. So in terms of like, if you find your lineup isn't realistic with Tom Brady or Ben Roethlisberger, I have no problem this week dropping down to Foles, a quarterback that the Eagles are really going to want to have him sling in, and they're going to want to see everything. This is almost like a test run. If they win, they basically have the bye. Even if they don't win this week, there's multiple situations where they get the bye week. So, the Eagles should want to see him throw. They want to win the game, but I think Foles sees a nice workload here, and you can pair him up with Ertz. Right. I don't think a lot of people will be on Gronkowski. Pittsburgh plays really well against the tight end position. So in terms of playing Gronkowski, I don't like him. I like the New England game, but I don't like Gronkowski. So Ertz is a nice elite play that's one level down.
Hey, Doc, talk to me about some of these high-end quarterbacks that Lou mentioned. Brady, you got Rodgers coming back. I'm going to stay away from him. You got Wilson, Breeze, Roethlisberger in that high-scoring, or what we're expecting to be high-scoring affair in New England. And then our favorite guy, Cam Newton, round out the top end. Do you like any of these high-end guys, Doc?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with guys with the last initial of B. I love Ben Roethlisberger, or first Ben or Brady, but first or last initial. I love Ben Roethlisberger. I think it's probably he could win people fantasy championships by himself this week. I agree with Lou about Brady. I have been preaching Chris Hogan for the last month. I think this is his game where he gets 1 to 2 touchdowns. I like Breeze. My only worry about Breeze in this game is, are they going to be up by 40-3 by the end of the third quarter? Maybe he doesn't need to do much. And I like Blake Bortles. I think Blake Bortles is in a real good spot. I know that the Vegas has this game at 39, but Houston with TJ Yates, I don't think gets anything done. I think this is a real good spot for Bortles. So I like any of those guys, maybe a little Russell Wilson, but I prefer the other 4.
So if all the B's besides playing Gabbard, it sounds like. All right. So Lou, any other guys in the mid-range that you like? Doc mentioned Blake Bortles. I don't mind Case Keenum at 7.4 on FanDuel, for example. That's probably about, besides Foles at 6,000, I doubt I'm going to drop lower than Keenum. Kirk Cousins versus Arizona. Any mid-range guys or any other QBs you want to talk about, Lou?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm going to stick around this game. So if I don't do Brady and I don't drop down to Foles, I mean, Ben Roethlisberger could see the shootout effect. New England, so I'm going to take this stat from Matthew Berry. He put in his write-up this week. Let me see if I can find it here. New England, after a loss, Brady has 24.5 points per game in his career after a loss. So I do think that this is a bounce-back game for Brady. But on the flip end, opposing quarterbacks typically see massive numbers too, and Ben Roethlisberger is the perfect guy to do that against a weak New England defense. Bill Belichick takes away your number one player typically. So if you're going to take Roethlisberger, Bill Belichick typically takes away your number one guy, which would be what I would assume he would take Antonio Brown away. Or Le'Veon Bell, but it's harder to take away Le'Veon Bell. But let's say he takes away Antonio Brown. Roethlisberger could be paired up very nicely. I don't want to skip in front to the wide receiver position, but Roethlisberger pairs up nicely with Martavius Bryant, assuming Belichick shuts down the number one. And I really like Martavius Bryant's price this week on FanDuel and DraftKings. I think he has massive upside, especially if the player that Belichick chooses to eliminate from this game is that's always his first thought, mind process, just so you know. If that player is Brown, I love Martavius Bryant this week, especially with Juju Smith-Schuster out or at least questionable right now.
Right, he's got a hamstring issue, guys. So, I think Martavius Bryant is a very sneaky play. Lou, what do you think about Jesse James this week?
Jesse James had a great game last week. Let me see exactly. So you're going up against a New England defense. I wouldn't say they're necessarily Yeah, he got 14 points last week, but he got a ton of targets. I wouldn't count on those targets again. I think that was more responsible. That was more because of like the way the game played out, and there were injuries in that game. Were there not? If I'm not mistaken, Juju was out,
Right.
and if I'm not, I do like it. I just have other places that I'm going this week. Yeah, I mean the one thing you said, Doc, that I forgot to agree with, the Hogan thing. I keep skipping around, and Fuego hates it on our podcast. But Hogan with that, I love taking players that have the shoulder designation, and I hope that stays there until Sunday, because that keeps every hobbyist off a player that I totally think is getting 2 touchdowns, just like you said, maybe hopefully with 100 yards.
Right. Yeah, we love to see those. We talk about it in NBA when you have that GTD, the game time decision next to their name.
It takes everybody off them.
Yes, for sure. I kind of agree. I like the high-end quarterbacks this week. I mentioned Foles just because of his price, but there's most of the guys that I'm going to be staying with. I even could go behind Russell Wilson versus LA. I like Breeze, Brady, Roethlisberger. Moving over to the running back position. Are you rostering Bell this week, Doc? Kamara, Ingram, Gurley, McCoy? Which running back are you paying him for? Fournette's questionable, correct? Any of these.
I'm all in on Lev Bell for sure. I mean, I think, as you said very astutely, that Belichick likes to take away the one thing you like to do. You can't take away Bell. So I think Brown is the guy you can take away. I'm worried about Kamara this week. Not that he's not a great player, he is, but I think coming off the concussion, if he's going to get about 60 to 7% of his usual touches. So if he's going to get 11 rushes, I give him 7. If he's going to get 7 catches, I give him 5. I think the opportunity is low there. I like Kenyon Drake a lot. I think he's in a great spot. I think Devonta Freeman, I know he's Monday. He's in a great spot. I think Ajayi is a great play. LaShawn McCoy is in a great play. I look for touches. Touches equals opportunity. And I'll give you the sneakiest guy I think on the board. Nobody's going to play him except me. I like Mike Davis. The Rams are not very good at stopping the run, and I think Seattle is going to have to learn to run the football, which Mike Davis did very well last week against Jacksonville. The problem was they were behind in that game, so they couldn't use him that much, but he ran very effectively.
He did. He had 15 attempts, 66 yards, busted off a 21-yard run, 4.4 average. So I agree, and I think you were a little bit on him last week, but they fell behind. Lou, talk to me about Bell. You definitely rostering Bell, or are you paying up for any of these other guys, or any mid-range guys like a McCaffrey, a Carlos Hyde, Alex Collins, who I don't mind going against Cleveland, Burkhead, and Drake, who I think is going to be pretty popular against Buffalo at that $6,500 price on FanDuel. What's his price on DK? Go ahead, talking about some running backs, Lou.
Yeah, so Doc mentioned one of my favorite plays, or 2 of my favorite plays. Le'Veon Bell, I think, has to be in there for exactly the same reason we both said. It's hard to shut down a running back that just stands in the backfield and waits for bigger blockers to block your smaller guys and then just takes off. So there's no way they can shut him down. So Antonio Brown should be the guy they shut down. So I do like Le'Veon Bell, and you can fit him in your lineups on FanDuel. On DraftKings, everything's harder. But other than that, the Jay Ajayi pick is like, when I constructed my main lineup, it was basically a New England-Pittsburgh stack with Ertz. I love Ertz this weekend against a Giants defense that can't guard the tight end position too well. And I love Jay Ajayi. It's crazy, but like,
you're not worried about putting Ajayi and Ertz in the same lineup?
Not at all. That's how a guy like Foles is going to succeed. If Ajayi's not playing well and he gets stopped, Foles won't have a good game. A good run game means a good pass game, and vice versa. So I think Ajayi is a great play, and people are forgetting that he ran that Miami offense. He really was just everything they had with, Jarvis Landry, and Parker. But, in terms of a quarterback, they didn't have much. So for a while, Ajayi ran that team. So I think he could do the same thing, and I think that's going to be the Eagles' game plan going forward. To try to win these playoff games. One other guy I like, if you are taking Tom Brady, so I have correlations here. So if I do go Foles, I'll go to Jay Ajayi, but right now on FanDuel, And this isn't relevant on DraftKings just because of the flex position. I'll have all three. But I like Dion Lewis against Pittsburgh. It's his everything's declining, but his in terms of his points, but his touches are like steady, and everyone's going to be on Brady. So consequently, a lot of people will be on the running backs, I think. So either Burkhead or Lewis. I don't think it's going to be a passing game for White unless they go down, but I don't think they will. Like I said, Brady recovers pretty well from losses. So I think this is going to be a big Patriots day. And James White, I don't like at all, but Burkhead is totally viable, and so is Dion Lewis. And the difference in their price is 65 and 63. So I'm actually more confident in Burkhead on FanDuel. I think the prices are a little different on DraftKings. But like Burkhead in his last two or three has 13.8, 23.8, and 18.3.
So Lou, let me ask you, if you were playing, by the way, first of all, Lewis went to college at University of Pittsburgh, so a little narrative play there.
Oh,
if you're going to play New England, are you going to go Brady, Lewis, Hogan?
I'm going Brady, Lewis, Hogan. Yeah, and if not, I'm going Brady, Lewis, Cooks. Nice. Part of me thinks that with the Gronk, like they're gonna like focus in on Gronk, which means Cooks is gonna have one crazy pass over the top, because the safeties are gonna have to be worried about Gronk doing those small posts, which means that if a safety even flinches, if Cooks gets one step on you, he's gone. So part of me like thinks that it could be a Cooks game. I'm gonna continue to monitor this. But I love going quarterback, running back, wide receiver. I find no reason that people, think that if you have, a quarterback, wide receiver, you shouldn't have the running back. A good running game leads to a good passing game. I mean, how many times do you see 300, 400 yards out of Roethlisberger and Bell and Brown do well as well?
And you would run it back with Bell on the other side, I assume. Basically what Lou's doing is game stacking.
I'm game stacking it for sure, and I think it's a perfect shootout game. And I'm running it not back with just Bell. I'm running it back with Bell and Martavius Bryant.
There you go.
So
that's the perfect example of a game stack where you think the game's going to go off. You roster running backs and receivers. You figure you get all the points from New England, and you get the other half.
Usually, when you do that, you either roster two guys from the losing team. And what's funny? You can even switch it down if you need to the quarterback from the losing team, because you'd be surprised if the Patriots get up big, like in the Super Bowl when they went down big. When you have to start slinging the ball, those fantasy stats add up really quickly. And if you ask a real professional, would you rather a full game of real football or a half of just Brady slinging the ball up and trying to get back into the game? A lot of people would say they want a half of Brady just getting back into the game.
Right, for sure. Doc, let me ask you about Kerwin Williams on DraftKings, 4,000. Would you go to him? He had 16 attempts 2 weeks ago, 20 attempts last week. Would you pay for go down with Kerwin Williams?
How much is Mike Davis comparatively?
Davis is same exact price.
I'll take Mike Davis. I think Kerwin Williams, look, he's not a bad player, but I just don't. I think those teams have given up. I think Arizona and Washington have given up, and that's the problem. I don't want mediocre players on bad teams at this point. It's just not something I want to play. I'd rather play for a guy who has something to play for, and I think Davis is a sneakier spot. But I don't hate P. Ryan, and I don't hate Kerwin Williams. I just don't want to use those guys because I don't like how the teams are playing.
Great point, Doc. Great point. That's one thing you want to look at this time of the NFL. This is DFS. Daily leagues are over, finishing up soon. I mean, not daily, season long. And so if you're making the shift over to DFS, you want the teams that have something to compete for. We're going to move over to wide receiver. We talked about Antonio Brown. He is far and away the most expensive on DraftKings. He's $1,400 more than DeAndre Hopkins. Lou and Doc mentioned how what's his face, the sweatshirt. Belichick likes to take away whatever he can, your best option, and in the passing game, that's usually is Antonio Brown. I don't know if they're going to completely be able to shut him down, though, just because I don't think their defense is that good. So that's my personal opinion. But if I was choosing between Brown and Bell, I'd obviously go Bell. So, Doc, talk to me about some high-end receivers that you like, or any receivers that you're liking this week at the wide receiver spot.
Okay, so I like Devin Funchess a lot. I like Jordy Nelson a lot. I like that game as a big game stack as well. I could stack, Rodgers, who I think is very sneaky this week, with Jamal Williams and Jordy Nelson and Christian McCaffrey and Funchess, and I have no problem with that game. I think Robbie Anderson is very sneaky. He's expensive, but Bryce Petty only looks his way. He did it last year. So I think he's an interesting play. I like Marquise Lee and Dede Westbrook. I think they're good plays. Stephon Diggs, I think you have to put him back in the equation. No Kyle Rudolph. I think Diggs and Thielen become interesting plays. That's where I'm looking.
I see a Q next to Funchess. Is he going to be good?
He's going to be good. He's had that question mark forever with the toe, but he'll be playing.
All right, great. Lou, some high-end guys I like. I don't mind Michael Thomas, Robbie Anderson getting up there in price, but I could get behind it. AJ Green, Adam Thielen. I could go to any of these guys. Well, what about Josh Gordon? You going to go back to Josh Gordon or any other high-end receivers this week, Lou?
No, I'm not. I usually let game day defensive or game day injuries dictate my value plays. So we have Wallace, that's questionable. I guess that would result in Macklin, but you get nervous about that just because his game logs are pretty bad. So going against Cleveland, I think they actually have one good cornerback. So I think that all results in me liking the tight end for Baltimore.
Okay. Ben Watson's a great start.
Yeah, Ben Watson's a nice start. It just stinks because if it did go to Macklin, it'd be nice. But I think I'm almost positive. I have to look at the depth charts, but I'm pretty sure Cleveland has a very good cornerback. Yeah, so I don't love I don't love the Macklin play, even though if Wallace is out, it should mean a lot of points. But yeah, Watson's the better play there. The wind is blowing or expected to blow in the Seattle game, usually resulting in a lot of like short passes, limiting the long stuff. So I guess Doug Baldwin's a viable play. He produces pretty consistently and is not just their short guy, but he's their everything. He can do a 5-yard dip. He's just their most consistent player. If the ball needs to be caught, they're throwing it to him. So I like him today. I love the Devin
price is down to 7,100 on FanDuel. It's continued to drop, and he's actually been putting up the monster game, so I see why. But last week 15 points, he had a touchdown, 78 receiving yards. So
yeah, I mean, listen, you're paying 7,100 for Baldwin, and just so you know, both of those matchups were very poor matchups. The defensive ranked 2nd and 4th against the wide receiver position, and he still had 10.9 and 15.3. So this is a slightly more favorable matchup, and I do think if you have the money, Doug Baldwin's a safer play. If you want to just kind of lock in 15 points, I think it's pretty safe.
Lou, let me ask you this question. If you go Wilson, Davis, Baldwin, I actually like Jimmy Graham too. Who do you use on the Rams?
Let me check this out real quick. Because typically
Sammy Watkins.
Typically, because I called Sammy Watkins earlier in the year, and it felt really good. And they do sling it. They have Woods higher priced or as the highest priced. And yeah, like Seattle's defense isn't at all what it used to be. But what you have to remember from this game is it's supposed to be 20-mile-an-hour gusts of wind. But yeah, if you look at Robert Woods' game logs, he has 11 targets and 10 targets in his past 2. And then he had 5 in the third one, but his points were pretty consistent and pretty good at 21, or not consistent, but they were pretty good overall, 21, 33, and 12. So I do like Robert Woods for consistency, but I don't expect anyone to, really launch the ball in 20-mile-an-hour winds. So I guess Cooper Kupp as the slot receiver would come in as the best play, and his usage and his targets, his usage, everything's going up. Everything's an uptick for him. He had that one bad game against Arizona, but I like him in those other 2 games against Philly and New Orleans. Philly's a very good team against the wide receiver, less so against the slot receiver, but Cooper Kupp could see a great game if you want to stack that game. I don't really do that. The other thing I forgot to mention is it's going to be cold in Buffalo. So if you're playing some of those Miami guys, you got to remember Miami college players sometimes go to Dolphins and they haven't played cold games like this, so you got to watch out for players that literally can't play in the cold.
Right.
There's a couple that they have a list online. I used to post it up on my right above my computer just to make sure. But yeah.
Do you like Kenyon Drake this week, or you think it's a risky play because of the cold weather?
No. Cold weather means running backs, unless he's fumble risk. I would love it if game day we get some rainy day news. I do like Drake.
How about that game last week in the snow? That was a fun game to watch.
Well, I had LaShawn McCoy in that really bad weather game. I think it was 2 weeks back, or if it was it last week?
Yeah, it was last week.
Yeah, but LaShawn McCoy, like that was such an obvious play. Like it's equally as hard for the defense to tackle in the snow as it is for people think the running back to run. It's like it's very difficult. So a guy like LaShawn McCoy or Le'Veon Bell benefits greatly in the snow because they're just in big space. It doesn't matter what it doesn't matter what team they're on or where they are. They're space guys. If they're in the middle of nowhere, they're going to deke you out whether you're in the snow or not. It definitely benefits them more in the snow, though.
Some other let me give you a couple names, Doc. Would you play any of these guys, or do you have any other value wide receivers? Ted Ginn, if he's good to go. Dede Westbrook, Danny Amendola, Tyler Lockett. Any of those guys?
Love Dede Westbrook. He's had 27 targets in the last 3 weeks. He's playing at a very high level against a defense that can't stop the pass. Ted Ginn is interesting. I like him, but man, he took a big shot at the end of that game last week, and I don't know whether those ribs are ready. So be careful. I think he may not even play. Just watch that closely. How about a guy that nobody's looking at? Maybe Cordero Patterson at $4,500. Amari Cooper's out. He might be an interesting play, but I don't think
Jones. If what's his name's? Oh no, he's on the other team. Never mind. Zay Jones at all? 4,500.
No, but I think Deontay Thompson's actually, because Zay Jones they've moved him out of the starting lineup. So the starters are going to be Benjamin and Deontay Thompson, who could be slightly interesting.
Okay, all right. Lou, any other wide receivers you want to touch on before we move over to tight end?
No, we're good. I should have said this in the beginning, but I have a defensive lock, and that's just so everyone knows.
No, stay on topic. Stay on topic.
No, I know, but it's important.
What is it?
It's important to say that because when you have such a lock, sometimes your lineup, is dependent on that lock, and my lock happens to be my defense.
What lock is that?
It's just the Jacksonville Jaguars against a Houston team, and I'll explain why later. But I just want to say all of my plays are a little bit further down because I'm actually paying up probably 80% exposure to the Jacksonville Jaguars defense, which is the most expensive on the slate.
Yeah, they sure are. 5,900 on FanDuel.
But they're worth it, and I'm gonna explain why. But just like going forward, I should have said this in the beginning, but I have less money to deal with than most.
Okay.
That. So that's why a lot of my lineup is based off that.
Now, let me ask you this, Lou. I love the Jaguars. I agree. But what about the Ravens, the Bills, the Vikings? I can make an argument for a bunch of these teams here. Do I need to pay the extra $900?
You don't need to, but in my opinion, I have a harder time finding value in defenses than I do in players. So I'd rather lock in the defense that I think could get 25 actual fantasy points today, this weekend, which is what they put up against Houston on week 1. The real reason I like them, is just for actual matchup reasons. They have the 2 best cornerbacks in the league, and Houston's offense is based off their 2 wide receivers. So if you have 2 wide receivers and that's your whole offense, beside Lamar Miller, which is I believe done, right? Or he was injured. Let me just make sure no, he's in, but he was injured a couple weeks back. I just am not worried. This Jaguars team is just too freaking spot on, and they need this game too. So I just think that it's easier to find value in a defense, and I love the Jaguars, and I'm paying $900. Can I not find a $900 price down guy, considering my game stack requires 1 wide receiver? Like for example, I was on Ertz, but I could drop down to Watson simply to make my defense work. Yes, there's a lot of value and there might be some weather, but there's a lock like the Jaguars this week doesn't come along too often, and I'm always getting defenses wrong. So I would rather just lock in the defense that I love And I don't think they're going to be too high owned because of the price.
That's a good point. And Joe had mentioned that last week too about especially like on FanDuel, locking in your defense and kicker and going from there because you need them to win this year. And Jacksonville has been putting up the numbers. I mean, they're like almost double digits every week. So that's a good point. You know what? Let's just do defense while we're here. We'll jump back to tight end in a minute. You mentioned Jacksonville, who you love. I mentioned Baltimore, who Lou, you didn't like as much going against Cleveland. We got Buffalo going get high-end guys. I could even go New Orleans versus the Jets at 46. Doc, who are some of the defenses you like?
I think that there's 4 outstanding defenses this week. I think that maybe 5. I think the Jaguars are a sensational play. I agree with Lou wholeheartedly. I mean, there's no way against TJ Yates that they don't ring him up. I think the Ravens are in a terrific spot against Cleveland. Kaiser forces the ball. He's going to throw at least 2 interceptions, going to get sacked 3 or 4 times. This is a money game here. I think the Vikings are in a great spot. Cincinnati literally scored 7 points at home against the Bears. Now they have to play the Vikings. Good luck with that. And then I think the last one, I think the Saints are very interesting up against Bryce Petty. I mean, Bryce Petty, how does a guy not throw for 3 picks, not get a couple of fumbles, not get a couple of sacks? So I think all those teams are big in play.
Yeah, I really like that New Orleans take for sure. I think I could go there. So, Lou, is there any other defense you like, or are you just going to lock in Jacksonville and be done with it?
For now, I'm going to lock in Jacksonville. If there's any extraneous stats like weather or injuries on game day, like that means a lot to me. So I've never actually done a Friday podcast, and that's when we're live or we're recording right now at Friday. So a lot of things happen then. But as of right now, I'm locking in every team with the assumption that I'm taking Jacksonville. The worst comes to worst in that scenario, you come down and then you adjust your team accordingly, which is very simple if you give yourself an hour before lock.
Right.
It depends on how many lineups you do.
Lou, I don't mean to digress. I want to go back to the New Orleans Jet game.
Yeah.
Are you worried about, would you play a Robbie Anderson in this game? Would you play a Michael Thomas? Do you worry about the Kamara? What would you do in that game?
Well, you mentioned that Ted Ginn was questionable. If he's out, I would totally lock in Michael Thomas. I know there are 2 different types of players, but when you take Ted Ginn out of the equation, in games like this, you rely on consistency. And Michael Thomas is a sure-handed wide receiver most of the time. He's really screwed me sometimes too, but he's supposed to be a very good. He's a corner route. I mean, he's a post route guy. So they'll give him little dip downs, and especially on DraftKings where you got the PPR, Thomas becomes a great play if Ted Ginn is out. And then on the other side of that game. I do like Robbie Anderson, but just remember, Bilal Powell typically ends the season like on fire. I don't know why it is.
Yeah, I like him as this week. I do.
Yeah, he's a catching running back, and most of the season he didn't do too much. He stayed kind of mellow, but don't be mistaken. He has a ceiling, and when the team lets him go crazy, look, like his game logs are horrific. But he's the kind of guy that really could go off. And last week he placed the first-ranked Denver defense. He played against the first-ranked Denver defense. And his only game that he actually performed is 12 points against Kansas City. But the fact of the matter is, if he gets involved in the game, Bilal Powell, if you look at his week 11 through 15 stats, they're off the charts in prior years. So, it's more of a GPP play for sure. Like I said, I have some other shore plays. But in terms of this game, I guess what I'm saying is the most comfortable thing I would lock in there is Michael Thomas. And then, by the way, you have Willie Snead sitting there. He was a non-factor all year and still is. But, I'm waiting for his breakout game. He doesn't really get much looks right now. He has 2 targets, but 2 targets in 3 out of his last 4. It's really freaking bad. But yeah, I don't know. I think the long answer is if Ted Ginn is out, Michael Thomas becomes a lock.
Yeah. All right, well, let's go over to the tight end spot. We mentioned Kelsey's on the Saturday slate, so we don't have him on this slate, but we do have Gronk and Ertz. Gronk's a little more on FanDuel. He's 85, and Zach Ertz is 7.9. Then Jimmy Graham, who I like at 6.7. Delaney Walker, 6.5. I don't mind. And Evan Ingram going against Philly. I don't mind. High-end tight ends, you paying up this week, Doc?
Let's see. I think there's a few that I do like a lot. I'm agreeing. I don't love Gronk this week. I love Zach Ertz this week. I think that a security blanket for a new quarterback is always its tight end. I don't love Kelsey this week. I know he looked good last week, but he was 1-for-1 the first time these teams played. I really like Jimmy Graham. I think he's in a great spot, and people will be very down on him after he literally put up a big fat 0 last week. I think the other guys who are interesting, Jared Cook. Dallas always likes to funnel things to the middle of the field. I've talked about this over and over again. I think he's in a good spot. And I think that my sneaky play of the week is Charles Clay, who always plays well against Miami. He used to play in Miami. He always shows up. Tyrod Taylor loves throwing to Clay. I like Clay as much as I like Ben Watson. I think those are the 2 best cheap tight ends on the board.
How about you, Lou? Who are some tight ends you're looking at this week?
Yeah, so I'm staying away from Gronk as well, which makes my lineup construction a lot easier, just because they guard the tight ends so well. I'm leaning more towards Cooks as it goes on because I have a little bit of money to mess around with. But I also love Zach. I love Zach Ertz and I love Benjamin Watson. We all know Cleveland struggled against tight ends this year, and Wallace might be out of the game. Macklin hasn't been performing well. Watson wasn't targeted last week, or he was targeted once, but he's kind of contingent on getting a touchdown. But he had 5 targets in the game against Detroit, and Detroit's poor against the tight end. He seems to flourish when they need him, and with Wallace potentially out of the game, usage is going to have to go somewhere. So if you have to come down, I would come down to Benjamin Watson. But the fact of the matter is, I love my favorite play is Zach Ertz.
So is he as bad as the Giants have been? Is Ertz getting in the end zone guarantee this week?
Yeah, I think so. Just because
even with Foles,
he played with Foles. He's the only guy on the team that has played a full year with Foles, and maybe multiple years. I have to look into it. But Ertz was on the team when Foles was on the team. Right. Foles used to be on the Eagles. So if Foles is going to feel comfortable with anybody, it's going to be Ertz. It's just you're still paying up. But you're paying up against a defense that is much, much worse in the Giants than you are for Gronkowski's situation against Pittsburgh. Right. So, and the flip side is there, I love Ajayi. So it's like, am I going to play Ajayi and Ertz and not play Foles? So that's why I keep thinking about going down to Foles, because the Ajayi Ertz play entails that the Eagles really demolish. And in that scenario, Foles would benefit as well.
Are you having a little anti-homerism against your Giants?
No, I mean, I'm a Giant fan, but in New York, it's kind of weird because you go to these games and even the Yankees, it's not fans. It's people that are selling box seats and it's really upsetting. I don't love the New York fan base by any means. When I went up to Boston and saw that Boston fan base, dude, it's we got to get that here. I just feel like in New York, it's not as clear cut as it is in some places like Green Bay.
Right, for sure. Well, yeah, you got a little of the higher end crowds there for sure. So any of these lower end tight ends pay for Julius Thomas, 5,400, Ricky Seals-Jones, Tyler Kroft, Austin Severian-Jenkins. You mentioned Jesse James, Doc. Any low end tight ends you're going to pay besides Ben Watson? You guys mentioned.
I told you Clay. Clay's my guy. I know that he's not an attractive play, but I'm big on the revenge narrative, and I think there's no bigger revenge narrative than this play.
All right. We always like to give a couple kicker picks. I'll let you think about it for a second, Lou. Gostkowski's probably my favorite at 5,000 if you can pay up going against Pittsburgh. I think I like Chris Boswell on the other side of that game as well. I could drop down to Gano or Kai Forbath again. Doc, any kickers you like?
I think Robbie Gould is a really good play. I mean, Tennessee is a bend-don't-break defense, and Jimmy Garoppolo has had a hard time finding the end zone. Why can't he get him down to the 30 and let Gould kick a field goal? I could see Gould with another 4 field goals this week.
Love it at 4,500. Lou, I know I popped it on you. Any kickers you like? You play FanDuel?
Yeah, I actually like Jacksonville's kicker.
What's his face?
Yeah. So he's priced at 4,700. The reason I like him is because I can see,
and you compare him with your defense.
Yeah, and that's why I like him, because I could see Jacksonville turning over turning them over quite a bit. So in that scenario, you'll see a lot of goal line or red zone opportunities for Jacksonville. They don't always end in good things. So considering I like the defense and I think that takeaways are not only possible but likely, Josh Lambo could benefit. And over his last two, he's had 10 points and 14 points. 14 points against Seattle last week, and then 10 points against Indianapolis. Oh, Fuego, I did your thing in the backwards on the podcast every day. Doc Fuego says Indianapolis when he means Indiana for basketball. I just did the same thing. But yeah, Josh Lambo looks like a great play at 4,700. I would love to lock him in Jacksonville. The only other thing you got to remember is Seattle. The Seattle game is the wind. So try to avoid those kickers. That's the only game I see that there's going to be wind this week. It might change by Sunday, but just in terms of me telling you who these guys are, I would avoid Greg Zerlin, which is the highest priced guy, if I'm not mistaken.
And when Lou mentions wind, you always like to look at that 15 mile per hour to 20
or
and
higher.
Up.
Yeah.
Yes. When you get up to that 20 mile per hour,
same actually goes for baseball.
Kickers is bad news.
Same goes for baseball. Like the Bay Area, yeah. 15 to 17 mile an hour. If you hit the gusts of wind at 20, that's really where you see the beneficial factors of the weather.
Right, for sure. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to touch on that primetime slate. We have Atlanta, Dallas, Oakland, Tampa Bay. Doc, you mentioned Devontae Freeman. Anybody in either of those games you like, Doc?
Yeah, I mean, I love Devonta Freeman. I love Julio Jones. I think I could go Ryan, Jones, Freeman, and with an Evans kicker there. I think that's a sensational starting point. I think Dak Prescott has a good matchup. I don't love Dez, but I probably would play him. Like I said, I like Jared Cook a little bit. So I think there's a few guys I can get behind.
All right, great. Lou, I'd like to thank you for coming on. Joanne, thoughts on the slate?
No, I'm ready to go. In terms of my beginning stuff, I would say just look for weather and injury updates before you lock anything in. And yeah, I mean, I guess I could say that this is the last week I will fully be investing time and money in NFL, considering the NBA qualifiers have just started.
There you go. We're getting kind of running down to the end of the NFL season. We still got a couple weeks to go. Make that shift. And it's funny, around Christmas is when I say the real NBA season starts. So we'll make that shift for sure over to NBA, NHL, any other sports. You guys, we got you covered at Scout TFS. All right, well, that's gonna do it for this edition of the Fuego Pit. For JaguarLou, Dr. Roto, like I always say, get that money. Peace.